All right, guys, it's time to hook up the new chain plates.
Going where the fair winds blow, our home is where the waters flow. We'll show you what we've come to know on board while sailing wisdom.
These are our old chain plates. They're very rusty and they look like just god-awful. These are our new ones, much prettier and a lot cleaner installation. So these used to be, the chain plate attached up here, and then it ran down this rusty iron frame all the way down to a very rusty iron frame that runs through the bottom of the boat. The bottom one we're gonna leave in there because that is integral to the boat, and there's no getting to that one. But everything about it that it needed to support is now gone. We beefed up the sides of the hull, and we bolted the new bronze chain plates directly to the thickened top sides. So everything here should hopefully work. We're gonna find out this summer when we go sailing in a couple days. All right, so what we need to do now is actually attach the rigging to these chain plates. So let's get started. Synthetic standing rigging with Deadeyes is incredibly simple. All it is your stay comes down and ends in an I-splice, which then turns into lashings. Those lashings run down and run back to a cockpit winch. This creates a big pulley system, and then your cockpit winch has a whole bunch of pull on it, and that can just pull all the load in to get the tension that you need on your rigging for whatever tension you need. Now the best part is, if you find that you need more tension than your arms can do with the cockpit winch, add an extra turn up here. Every time you make the lashing pass through this, you're adding 2 more to that system. So in other words, if you have 4 passes on this, you have an 8-to-1 system. If that's not enough force for you, you need more. You do 1 more pass. Now you have 5 passes up here and a 10-to-1 system, which means every 10 pounds or every 1 pound of force that you put in, you get 10 pounds out. You put 100 pounds in at the winch, you're getting 1,000 pounds out of here. Now by adding a winch to this, you then increase that force multiplier by even more. So the number that's stamped on the top of your winch isn't just there for pretty sake. It tells you the force multiplier of that winch. So if you have a 23 winch, it multiplies every pound you put in by 23 pounds. You have a 45, you guessed it. You put in a pound, you get 45 pounds out. So if you need 100 pounds on this line being pulled, and it's going back to the winch, and you have a 45 winch, you're putting in a little over 2 pounds. It's easy peasy. Anyone can do that kind of force. And like I said, if you need more mechanical advantage, all you have to do is add an extra turn to the pulley system, and now you got it. So our pulley system starts off really simple. We have 5 passes, and that makes a 10-to-1. It comes down to this turning block, which is just tied onto our tow rail, and that takes the line perfectly vertical to this, and then turns it directly aft. So at this point, we're looking at a 10-to-1 system. It's pretty good. We then cut that down because if you notice, both tails are being let out. So that means that it's pulling with half the force. So this actually goes from a 10-to-1 back to being a 5-to-1, but that's okay. And the reason that's okay is because right here, this is a 2-to-1. So that 5-to-1 at this point turns right back into a 10-to-1 at this point. The line is then led aft to our cockpit winch. This one serves as an anchor. It doesn't do anything. It's our smaller winch, it's a 27. This one over here is a 32. So that means our 10-to-1 system then gets multiplied right here by 32 and becomes a 320-to-1 system. So that means every pound of force I put in on this winch handle right here gives us 320 pounds at the stay. Now obviously, that's a theoretical number. There's friction involved, and that is not accounted for. So that 320-to-1 is gonna get cut down significantly. But it's still plenty to get the tension that we need on our rigging. And if you need more tension, simply use more turns in your pulley system. That's all it is to it. It's that simple. And if you really, really need more tension, you can add additional pulley systems into it to multiply again. Now, for the sake of symmetry, it's important that when you're tensioning your rig, you do it symmetrically. You want to do both sides at the same time. So if you're working on the cap shroud, you're working on both cap shrouds at the same time. You want to set up the exact same pulley system for both of them. That way the force you put in on one side is the same force you're going to put in on the other side. So by arm feel, you can tell I've pushed this hard on the winch, so therefore I have to push this hard on the other winch. Once you get your tension on, then you're going to sight the mast, make sure it's actually straight, make sure the mast head is centered over the boat, and then tie it off, move on to the next stay. Now I like to do them cap shroud first, forward lower, then aft lower. And the reason is the rig tensions go cap shroud's the tightest, forward lower is a little looser, aft lower is the loosest. That's it. So if you go in that order, you know, don't make it tighter than the previous one and you'll be good. And if you do have to make it tighter than the previous one, that means that the previous one wasn't made tight enough and you got to go back to it. So in an older video about how to tension your rig and how to get your masthead centered directly over the boat where it belongs, a whole bunch of you guys were commenting about how that only works if the boat's level, because if the boat's listing, you're going to center the mast at an angle because the mast is, you know, canted off to a side because so is the boat. Well, the thing is, you got to get the boat level. That's all there is to it. You have to trim out any list that your boat has, get it level, and then you can do this. So if your boat isn't level, simply make it level. Put weight where you got to put it. That way it becomes level. So in our case, that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to make sure the boat is nice and trim, and then we're going to center the masthead. With that, we have the cap shrouds tightened off. We have them centered so the mast is hanging directly over the middle of the boat. So everything is now ready to tie off so we can disconnect this whole tensioning method. Because when you're sailing, you need your winches for your sheets. You can't have them tied up with all your cap shrouds. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna tie the seizing knot. Now it's a type of frapping knot, which is why it's called the Shroud frapping knot. So it's going to pinch all of these together, lock them in place, make sure none of them can move, which then holds your rig tension perfectly as it's set. Because the tension here is the same as the tension that's leading back to the winch. If we pinch it off so this can't move, we don't need the part that goes back to the winch anymore. Okay, so in tying the Shroud frapping knot, you need to identify what's going on. So these are the standing parts of the lashing system. And these are the tails that run off to the winch. So you don't really want to include these right now because if you do, it kind of makes stuff a little messy. So you want to just use just these. These are the guys that you want to be tying off. So in tying the Shroud frapping knot, you're going to have a tail that hangs vertically, and then this part is just going to wrap around the outside a lot of times. Now, being how we have these tails coming down that are kind of in the way, we need to work around them. Now your first few are loose because you're just getting everything set up. Now this tail, when the knot tightens down, this tail is going to get crushed and held in place. So you don't have to worry about it then. But right now, you got to keep a little bit of an eye on it. All right, so now we have 3 turns around it. I'm just going to hold here just to give it some tension. I'm just going to pull in. Okay, at this point, we don't really have to worry about this guy anymore. It's set. So now we can just focus on this part. So we have these 3 turns hand tighten. I'm going to hold a little tension here, and we're going to put a 4th loop on. Not enough tension. There we go. All right. Now we have 4 loops on there. Now we're going to tie something that's called a marlin spike hitch, which is really easy to tie and really quick to tie, which is important. And now we have a nice big handle to pull against. So we're going to hold there. I'm just going to slip this off the end. The marlin spike hitch pulls free. And we're going to do the next wrap. All right, now we have a few. I did 2 turns. Now the marlin spike hitch. And we pull it really tight. Okay, 2 more turns. Really tight. So when you're tying the Shroud frapping knot, the minimum number of turns you want to do is 10. Now minimum doesn't mean do 10, do the minimum. No, no, do more than 10, do a lot of them. I like to have about 2 to 3 inches of frapping turns, and that'll hold it really securely. But I've done in testing, I've found that 10 is the minimum. If you do 9, it slips. If you do 11 or 10, it holds. So you might as well do like 20 or 30, let's be honest. 18, 19, and 20. Like I said, 10's the minimum. Do more than 10 though. So for this next step, you have these gaps up here, right? You have a gap where the rigging goes over the thimble and over around the Deadeye. So you have that on both sides. What you're gonna do is you're gonna pass this tail through those gaps, and then you're gonna pull it really, really tight. Same business, Marlin spike hitch. And once again, we pass it through the gap at the bottom, back through the gap at the top, Marlin spike hitch, and really tight. So the minimum that you want to have are 2 vertical parts. So that means that you want 10 horizontals and 2 vertical. With that, you're good. But once again, that's a minimum. And we're gonna do a couple more because we have a good bit of tail. I'm gonna make it kind of loose. That way this can pass through the bottom and then just tie off here. Now, you could finish the knot properly and like really tie it off nice and tight, but being how it's currently 106 degrees today, it's really hot, this rigging is definitely going to loosen up as it cools down because Dyneema expands as it cools, just like with ice. So that means that if it's really tight today, it's not going to be really tight when it cools down. I like to set the rigging when it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit, but being how it's July right now, that's not going to happen for a while. So I'm not gonna, so what I'm saying is don't make the knot impossible to untie later because then you have to go replacing this little tiny Dyneema frapping line every time you go to retie it or adjust the tension. So what I do with the excess is I just wrap it up here and it just keeps it out of the way. This is the knot that's doing something. This is just extra tail being tied out of the way. Now we're gonna take the tails off of the lashing and we're gonna tie them over this to protect everything. Because as you can imagine, this knot is very important. If it gets damaged, chafed, anything at all, there goes your rigging. So we wanna protect this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna tie a decorative knot over this as a protective knot. Now we have these tails that come down. We're simply going to make them less bulky. So have less line just going everywhere. And we're just gonna bring them through just as decorative purposes. So we're just using up the line, that way we don't have that much left over. So we're pretty much just using up the slack. That's all it is. All right, now, this is where we're gonna tie the decorative knot that goes over it, called a tout line hitch. So you come down, you make a 90-degree turn, and then you come in over it. All right, your next one goes down below, but when it comes back through, it goes above it, and then you pull it down. And you do that 3 times. That's all there is to it. All right. And that's not gonna be enough to cover it, so we're gonna want some more than that. So in that case, make some more. So we just pull it out, and we start with a longer piece, more tail. Now, this part, we're just gonna loop around a bunch, just to cover the knot up. So when you see synthetic rigging tied off, it looks like the lashings are tying it off and holding everything, but in reality, they're just protecting the functional knot that's underneath of them. And the functional knot is called, you guessed it, the shroud frapping knot, because it fraps the shroud. Now we have that one tied off. Now we're gonna do the other side. And with that, it's covered, it's protected. The working knot, the shroud frapping knot that's inside, that one's safe. And then everything is covered up and looks a lot better. Next thing to do is to do the same procedure on the other side, tie it off, and then we move all of our setup to the next set of shrouds, tension those up, and then once again to the last set of shrouds, and then tie everything off, and then we're done. That's the process of tensioning and tuning your rigging with synthetic rigging.
Thanks for watching this episode of Sailing Wisdom. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next Rigging Doctor episode. And if you're interested in even more Rigging Doctor awesomeness, consider becoming a patron to see all of our extras. Can't wait to see you next time as you join us out here on the high seas.